The sun was slowly rolling down, coloring the dusty streets of the small Colombian town in shades of ochre and terracotta. Mariana Escobar sat on a worn wooden bench in front of her house, keeping her eyes on her 3-year-old daughter, Angela, who was struggling to master a brand new scooter. It was a modest gift, a simple metal structure with worn rubber handles, bought on sale at a local store, but it was a significant expense for their family. Raúl settled down next to his wife, his tanned arm lightly around her shoulders. He still smelled of the mine, a lingering odor of coal dust that even the most thorough washing couldn't eradicate. Marianne had long ago grown accustomed to the odor, as she had to the black rims under her husband's fingernails that appeared every night despite the protective gloves. Look, she's almost learning to keep her balance," Mariana whispered, squeezing her husband's hand. Angela, biting her lip with eagerness, slowly pushed off the ground with her foot. The scooter traveled a few meters and stopped, causing the girl to squeal with delight. Their house was small, only 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen, but Marianne kept it spotlessly clean. She starched the faded curtains every week and scrubbed the clay floor to a shine. The walls, once painted yellow, were now peeling in places, revealing gray concrete, but Marianne hung embroidered doilies on them, making the rooms cozier. From the street came the familiar sounds of their neighborhood, dogs barking somewhere, music playing from an old radio, the voices of neighbors. The evening was warm, and the air smelled of the jasmine that Marianne had planted under the window the first year they lived here. Papa, look how I can!" Angela pushed off again, more confidently this time. Her dark curls bounced in time with the movement, and a happy smile shone on her face. Raúl got up from the bench and patted her. "My little princess, soon you'll be riding faster than the wind." He walked over to his daughter, ready to pick her up if she lost her balance. Marianne watched them, feeling her heart overflow with tenderness. Raúl was a good father. Tired after work, he always found the strength to play with his daughter, read her a story, ride on his shoulders. A window opened in the house across the street, and Adelina, Marianne's mother, looked out. "Dinner is almost ready. Come in, everyone, before it gets cold," she shouted. Adelina had been living with them since Marianne's father died. She helped with the household and looked after Angela while Marianne did chores around the house. Her presence was a blessing. Raúl's salary alone was hard to live on, and Adelina's pension, though small, helped make ends meet. "Angela, honey, one last lap and let's go to dinner," Marianne called out. The girl pouted her lips but didn't argue. She had already learned to sense when it was okay to be stubborn and when it was better to obey. The kitchen smelled of hot peppers and fresh cilantro. Adeline was making lentil soup, a frugal but hearty dish. The plates were already on the table, polished to a shine, an old set left by Marianne's grandmother. She had kept it as the apple of her eye, taking it out only on special occasions or when she wanted to please the family. Rosita, Marianne's younger sister, came running at the last minute as usual. She worked at the local bakery and often stayed late to help with the cleaning. "I brought fresh bread," she announced, placing a still warm loaf on the table. They sat around the table, a small but tight-knit family. Raúl was leisurely cutting bread. Adelina was pouring soup onto plates. Rosita was helping Angela to sit up, putting a pillow under her so she could reach her plate. Mariana watched them and thought about how lucky she was. Yes, they lived modestly, but there was always love and care in their home. Every evening they gathered together, shared news, made plans for the future. Raúl dreamed of saving money for a small store, something simple, maybe a grocery store. Marianne supported this dream, although she realized how difficult it would be to realize it. After dinner, Raúl took Angela in his arms and carried her to bed. The girl was already pecking her nose, tired of impressions and riding on a scooter. Mariana stayed to help her mother with the dishes while Rosita put the leftovers into containers. Raoul would take them to work tomorrow. "Are you happy, daughter?" Adelina asked suddenly, handing Marianne a washed plate. Marianne smiled. "Of course I am, Mom. I have everything I need. A loving husband, a wonderful daughter, you and Rosita by my side. What more could I want?" Adeline nodded, but something in her gaze made Marianne wary. The feeling passed quickly, though. Her mother had always been a bit anxious, especially after her father's death. The evening ended as usual, Raoul smoking his only cigarette of the day on the porch, Rosita running off to her room, referring to her early shift tomorrow, Adelina in her chair knitting. Marianne checked to make sure Angela was sleeping well, adjusted the blanket and lay in bed, listening to the familiar sounds of the hushed house. She didn't know that this quiet, peaceful evening was the last in a string of similar days. Soon enough her life would change forever. But for now, Marianne fell asleep with a smile, remembering the joyful face of her daughter riding her scooter. The morning began as usual, with the noise of an old alarm clock and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Marianne rose early to prepare breakfast for Raoul before he left for the mine. She mechanically sliced bread and fried scrambled eggs, always glancing at her watch. Her husband did not like to be late. Raoul appeared in the kitchen as she was putting the food on plates. He smelled of cheap soap and toothpaste. His work clothes, though old, were carefully laundered and darned. Marianne watched this especially carefully, remembering how the other miners sometimes laughed at the scruffy appearance of their co-workers. "The coffee is especially good today," Raoul said, taking a sip. Marianne smiled. She had added a pinch of cinnamon, knowing how her husband liked it. Little things like that helped to make their poor life a little more pleasant. Outside, they heard the sound of an engine. It was the truck that took the miners to their shifts. Raoul hurriedly finished his coffee, kissed his wife on the cheek, and went out. Marianne walked him to the door, as she had done every morning for the past 12 years. When she returned to the kitchen, she began to clear the table. The house was quiet. Angela was still asleep. Adelina was usually up later. These morning hours were Marianne's time. She could do her chores without being distracted by requests and conversations. She was just hanging the laundry on the patio when she heard Rosita's sonorous voice. "Good morning. I brought fresh buns." Her sister had been working at the bakery since 5 in the morning and often stopped by on her way home, bringing treats for her niece. Rosita looked excited. She was fussily arranging the buns on a plate, telling her the latest news. "Can you imagine Senora Morales is divorcing her husband? They say he's been living on 2 houses, here and in the neighboring town, for 6 months. And she knew nothing all this time." Marianne shook her head. Poor woman, how could one not notice? She poured her sister some peppermint tea. Rosita liked to gossip over a cup of the hot beverage before going to bed after her night shift. "That's what I'm thinking. How is that possible? Although men can be very sneaky when they want to hide something." Rosita raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "By the way, I saw your Raoul outside the El Toro bar yesterday. He was in such a hurry to get somewhere after work." Marianne frowned. "After work? But he came home as usual at 6 in the evening." Maybe it was a different day. Rosita shrugged, but something strange flashed in her eyes. "You know my memory. I mix things up." At that moment, a sleepy Angela entered the kitchen, dragging her favorite teddy bear behind her. The conversation was interrupted as both women busied themselves with the girl, helping her wash and dress. The day went on as usual: laundry, cleaning, making dinner. Adelina was busy with Angela, showing her how to mold figures out of dough. Marianne listened to their laughter while she picked beans for tomorrow's soup. After lunch, she went to the store. The stock of cereals was running low. On the way, she met a neighbor, Consuela Ortiz, a middle-aged woman with a sharp tongue and attentive eyes. "Mariana, wait!" Consuela called out to her. "I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time." Something in her tone made Marianne wary. Consuela looked around and lowered her voice. "Do you know Carla Santos, the one who lives on Olive Street?" Mariana shook her head. The name was unfamiliar. "Tall one, with reddish hair. Recently moved in with her brothers." Consuela pressed her lips together. "Anyway, I saw your husband with her at El Toro last week, and they were, how shall I put it, very close. He was holding her waist. They were laughing." Marianne felt the ground go from under her feet. "You must be mistaken. Raoul doesn't go to bars." "Honey, I know what I'm saying. They were sitting by the window. I could see them well enough, and it wasn't the first time." The rest of the way to the store, Marianne walked like a fog. Rosita's words about Senora Morales' husband, about the cunning of men, reverberated in her mind. She mechanically picked up the groceries, barely looking at the prices, even though she usually calculated every peso carefully. At home, the first thing she did was check Raoul's work clothes. She smelled no perfume, no trace of lipstick. But what did that prove? He could have been careful. In the evening, when Raoul returned from work, Marianne watched him carefully. He'd behaved as usual, played with Angela, ate dinner, told a few stories from the mine. But now she could see a catch in his every gesture, in his every word. After dinner, when they were alone, she ventured, "Raoul, do you know Carla Santos?" He froze for a moment, then slowly turned to her. "Why do you ask?" "Consuela saw you two together at the bar. She says you were hugging her." Raoul sighed. "It was one time. I was having a drink with the guys after my shift. She just happened to be there as well. Nothing between us, I swear. I got hung over then and did something stupid." "Really?" Marianne scrutinized his face, trying to catch signs of lying. "Of course it's true. You know I only love you and Angela." He hugged her, and Marianne let herself believe, wanted to believe, had to believe. But something snapped that night. She began to notice little things she hadn't seen before, the way Raoul was staying late at work more often, the way he was more careful about his appearance, the way he sometimes answered offhandedly, as if his thoughts were somewhere far away. Adeline noticed the change in her daughter. "Is something wrong?" she asked one day when they were making dinner together. "No, Mom. Everything is fine," Marianne replied, but her hands trembled as she cut vegetables. She lay awake for long stretches of nights, listening to her husband's breathing, trying to figure out, had his sleep changed? Had he become more restless? Was he saying someone else's name? Her world, so simple and clear, began to fall apart, turning into a puzzle she couldn't put together. And somewhere on the edge of her mind, a thought raced through her mind. What if Consuela was right? What if this was just the beginning? It had been a week since her conversation with Consuela. Marianne tried to behave as usual, cooking, cleaning, taking care of Angela. But there was something dark and heavy inside her that made it hard to breathe. Every time Raoul was even half an hour late from work, her heart began to beat faster. That day, she decided to do a big load of laundry. She emptied all the laundry baskets, even pulled Raoul's work clothes out of the closet. Usually she washed them separately because of the coal dust, but today something pushed her to check the pockets more thoroughly. In the back pocket of her pants, she found a crumpled receipt from El Toro's. 2 shots of whiskey, salad, roast meat. The date was 3 days ago, the day Raoul had said he'd be delayed at the mine because of an equipment check. Marianne sat on the floor among the scattered laundry, clutching that piece of paper in her hands. Rosita's voice echoed in her head. Men can be very sneaky when they want to hide something. "Mom, what are you doing?" Angela's voice snapped her out of her daze. The girl stood in the doorway, cradling the tattered bear to her chest. "Nothing, sweetie. Just sorting out Daddy's clothes for laundry." Marianne hastily tucked the check into her apron pocket. "Come on, Will you help me hang the sheets? She spent the entire day as if in a fog. Adeline had asked several times if everything was all right. Marianne had twice oversalted the soup and nearly burned the tortillas. But how could she explain to her mother what was going on in her heart? How to tell her suspicions without making them more real? In the evening, when Angela was asleep and Adelina had gone to her room, Marianne decided to talk. Raoul sat in the courtyard smoking his evening cigarette. The light of the tobacco seemed especially bright in the darkness. "I found a check from El Toro," she said, standing in the doorway. "From the 3rd of the 3rd. Raoul slowly put out his cigarette. "So? You said you were at the mine, checking equipment, remember?" A heavy pause hung. "I went in for a drink after the inspection," Raoul finally said. "With the guys. Nothing much." "With the guys or with Carla?" He turned sharply toward her. "Are you at it again?" "I explained it. There's nothing going on between us." "Then why did you lie? Why didn't you tell me you were at the bar?" "Because I knew you'd make things difficult." Raoul rose from his chair. "Don't I have the right to have a drink after work?" "You do, but you don't have the right to lie to me." They stood opposite each other in the semi-darkness. Marianne felt her hands trembling and clasped them behind her back. "I'm tired of these suspicions," Raoul said quietly. 12 years together and you don't believe me." "I used to believe you, until I started to notice." "Noticed what? That I go into a bar sometimes? That I talk to people?" "What?" Marianne took a deep breath. "You've changed. You've become distant. I can feel it, Raoul. Every day I feel it." He shook his head. "It's all in your head, Marianne. You're getting yourself worked up over some neighbor's gossip. Consuela isn't lying. She saw you hugging that woman. Jesus, it was a one-time thing. I had too much to drink. She slipped. I supported her. That's the whole story." But something in his voice, some false note, made Marianne shudder. She remembered her mother telling her as a child, "Trust your heart. It will never deceive." "Swear on it," she whispered. "Swear on Angela's life that there is nothing between you." Raoul turned away. "I won't swear. It's humiliating." "Humiliating? More humiliating than lying to your wife?" He took a sharp step toward her. "I won't discuss it again. You're acting like a mad woman." Marianne recoiled. Never before had she seen such anger in his eyes. Raoul squeezed past her into the house, slamming the bedroom door. She was left standing in the yard, wrapping her arms around herself. The night air was warm, but a chill ran through her. She remembered Senora Morales's face when she had learned of her husband's betrayal, aged, gaunt, eyes droopy. The light was on in the house across the street, and Adelina was probably still awake. Marianne thought of going to her mother, of telling her everything, of crying on her shoulder. But something held her back, pride or fear of making the situation more real. She spent another hour in the yard trying to gather her thoughts. In front of her eyes was the image of Carla, a woman she'd never met, but who was already ruining her life. What was she like? Beautiful? Young? What was so special about her? When Marianne finally returned to the bedroom, Raoul was lying on the edge of the bed, turned away from the wall. His breathing was too even for a sleeping man, but she didn't say anything. She lay on her side of the bed, feeling the chasm growing between them. The next morning began as usual, with the noise of the alarm clock and the smell of coffee. But now every habitual action seemed fake. Every gesture seemed contrived. Raoul quickly ate breakfast and left without even kissing her goodbye. Marianne mechanically did her housework, tried to smile at Angela, to answer Adelina's questions. But a determination was growing within her. She must learn the truth. She must see this woman with her own eyes, understand what was happening in her own home. That evening she took out an envelope from her dresser with money in it, for a rainy day, as Adeline had said. She counted the bills enough to hire someone to watch Raoul, but then she shook her head and put the money back. No, she'd do it herself. It's her husband, her family, her pain. After the night's conversation, Raoul started coming home later and later. Each time he had an explanation. He was delayed at the mine, he had to help a comrade, or the equipment broke down. Mariana didn't ask anymore. She just silently warmed up dinner and put the plate on the table. Angela often asked why her father didn't read her bedtime stories like he used to. Mariana would make excuses. Daddy was very tired at work. He needed to rest, maybe tomorrow. At such moments, she felt complicit in the destruction of her own family. Lies, even if for the good of the child, bitter on the tongue. One morning, while hanging laundry in the yard, she overheard her neighbors talking. Saw that Carla Santos yesterday in her new dress, red, tight, and heels. Can you believe it? In this town. Yeah, she's dressed up like a carnival. They say her brothers are into some dark business. And she's having affairs with married men. Unscrupulous. Marianne clutched the wet sheet in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. So the whole town is already judging about this? Does everyone know? But her? That afternoon she went to Olive Street just to walk around, to look. Carla's house was small but well kept. There were new curtains with lace on the windows and pots of brightly colored flowers in the yard. Everything looked expensive, tasteful. How could they afford it? After all, the brothers, as far as she'd heard, didn't work anywhere officially. As she walked past, she saw Carla herself, a tall woman with reddish hair pulled back into a sloppy knot. The neighbors hadn't lied. She was dressed like a city fashionista, not like a resident of their small mining town. Marianne felt her insides tighten. This woman was the complete opposite of herself, a tired housewife in a laundered dress. At home, Adeline was waiting for her, alarmed by her daughter's long absence. "Where have you been? Angela has asked about you twice already." "Went to the market," Mariana lied without looking her mother in the eye. Adelina shook her head. "Daughter, I can see it. Something is going on. Why aren't you saying anything?" Marianne felt her eyes fill with tears. She sank down on the chair, covering her face with her hands. "Mom, I don't know what to do. He's changed. Everything has changed." Adeline put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Tell me everything." And Marianne told, about the bar, about the check, about the night's conversation, about her suspicions, about seeing this woman today so beautiful and confident. "Maybe it's really all in my head," she whispered. "Maybe I made it all up myself." Adeline stroked her daughter's hair. "You can't fool a mother's heart. If you feel something is wrong, then it is." At that moment, Angela ran into the room, and the conversation had to be interrupted. The girl was showing her grandmother and mother a drawing. She had drawn their family, all together and happy. Marianne barely held back her tears as she looked at the crooked figures holding hands. Rosita came in the evening bringing fresh bread and news. "There's talk of layoffs at the mine. Maybe they'll even close one of the tunnels." Raoul didn't say anything about that, Marianne wondered. Does he talk about anything at all lately? Rosita looked at her sister carefully. Marianne remained silent, pretending to be busy wiping dishes. But her sister's question hit the mark. When was the last time they'd had a real conversation with her husband? Not about household trivia, not about money, but just talking like they used to. The next morning, she decided to walk Raoul to the truck like she had done before. He was surprised, but he didn't say anything. Already at the truck, she caught his arm. "Why don't we go to the park with Angela on Sunday, like we used to?" He hesitated. "I don't know. I might have things to do." "What kind of things on Sunday?" "Stuff." He released his hand and climbed into the back of the truck without even saying goodbye. Marianne stood staring after the truck, feeling a cold resolve growing inside. No, she would no longer sit and wait for her family to fall apart. She spent the rest of the day thinking about a plan of action. First, she needed to find out more about Carla and her brothers. Everyone in their small town knew everything about everyone, or thought they did. All she had to do was find the right people and ask the right questions. She started at the bakery where Rosita worked. Helping her sister with the cleaning, as she did on occasion, she listened to the conversations of the customers. It soon became clear that the Santos brothers were making irregular appearances in town, often leaving somewhere in an old truck and returning in the middle of the night. "Smugglers," the women whispered, "and their sister is the same. Where do they get the money to live like that?" In the evening, as she was putting Angela to bed, Mariana heard the engine of Raoul's motorcycle start in the yard. She looked out the window. Her husband was leaving without even warning her. She could see in the light of the street lamp that he was wearing his best shirt. Adeline, noticing her gaze, said quietly, "Don't torture yourself. Come, I've made chamomile tea." But Marianne shook her head. "No, mother. I must know the truth, the whole truth." She went up to the bedroom and took out of the dresser the money she had been saving for a rainy day. She counted the bills, not much, but it should be enough for the first time if she had to. She didn't let herself finish that thought. Instead, she sat down at her desk and began writing down everything she knew about Carla Santos and her brothers. Every detail, every rumor, every observation. Something told her that the clue lay not in romantic encounters in a bar, but in something more serious and dangerous. Raoul came home late that night. He smelled of alcohol and cigarettes. He tried to move quietly, but stumbled over a chair in the kitchen. Marianne lay awake, listening to his awkward attempts to undress in the dark. When he finally lay down, she smelled an unfamiliar odor, a woman's perfume, light but distinct. She had made a decision that night. Tomorrow she would start following Carla Santos. Not her husband. She already knew enough about his betrayal. No, she wanted to find out what this woman was hiding. Because her intuition told her, there, in this secret, lies something much more terrible than the usual adultery. Marianne began her surveillance early in the morning. She told Adelina that she was going to the market and asked her to keep an eye on Angela. Her mother asked nothing, only nodded with a look of concern. She had long ago learned to read her daughter's moods. Carla's house was a 20-minute walk away. Marianne had chosen a convenient place to watch, a small cafe across the street where she could sit for hours with a cup of coffee without attracting attention. The shabby awning created enough shade to keep her face invisible. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. Carla went out into the yard, watered the flowers, talked to her neighbor. She was wearing a blue dress that must have cost more than Marianne spent on clothes in a year. Her movements were smooth, confident, the movements of a woman who knew her power. Around noon, a shabby truck pulled into the yard. 2 men stepped out of the cab, the Santos brothers. It was the first time Mariana had seen them so close. The older, Manuel, was tall and wiry, with deep-set dark eyes. The younger, Jorge, was shorter and sturdier, with a prominent scar on his right cheek. They quickly unloaded some crates, bringing them into the house. Marianne noticed how carefully they carried them, as if there was something fragile inside. Half an hour later, the truck left, and the brothers stayed behind. The waitress at the cafe was already beginning to cast suspicious glances at Marianne. I had to order more coffee and a sandwich, even though I couldn't eat another bite. The money was melting away. These sit-downs in the cafe were not part of her usual budget. Toward evening, something strange began to happen. Motorcycles and cars started pulling up to the house. People went inside empty-handed and came out carrying small packages or bundles. Everything was happening quickly, businesslike, without too much talking. Carla stood on the porch, writing something down in a small notebook. She smiled at each visitor, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Marianne noticed one of the men hand her an envelope, which she immediately tucked into the pocket of her dress. Suddenly, a familiar motorcycle stopped in front of the house. Marianne's heart sank. Raoul. He was in work clothes. Apparently, he had come straight from the mine. Carla greeted him with a special smile. Warm, intimate. They talked briefly about something. Then Raoul entered the house with Manuel. Marianne clutched the cup. So he knew about their business was part of it. But part of what? She sat in the cafe until dark. Patrons continued to come and go, more cautiously now, looking around. The brothers periodically brought new crates out of the outhouse in the courtyard. Marianne noticed that some of the boxes had the logos of the local El Campo farm. Around 9 p.m., a truck fully loaded with boxes pulled away from the house. Jorge was behind the wheel, with some unfamiliar man next to him. They set a course for the exit from the city. Marianne paid and walked slowly home, thinking about what she had seen. Things were starting to come together now. Expensive clothes, regular visitors, crates from the farm. They were in the business of stealing and reselling. And Raoul was in on it. She was in for an unpleasant surprise at home. Her husband had already returned and was clearly out of sorts. "Where have you been?" he asked, standing in the kitchen doorway. He smelled of alcohol. "At the market. Then I stopped by Rosita's," Marianne lied as she walked past him. "Liar! I was at Rosita's an hour ago. You weren't there." Marianne froze. What was he doing at her sister's? Had he been following her? "I went to see a friend," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "What friend?" Raoul stepped closer. "Give me a name." "None of your business." He grabbed her arm. "Have you been following me?" Marianne lashed out. "Let go! You're drunk." "Answer me. Have you been following me?" A threatening note appeared in his voice. "No!" She raised her voice. "And don't you dare grab me." At that moment, Adelina entered the kitchen. "What's going on here?" Raoul backed away, muttering something to himself. A moment later, the front door slammed. He was gone again. "Daughter, what's wrong?" Adeline hugged a trembling Marianne. "Mommy, I've learned such a thing. Such a terrible thing." "Hush, hush. Angela might hear. Come to my room." A single lamp burned in her mother's room, creating a cozy semi-darkness. It smelled of herbs Adelina liked to hang bunches of mint and molasses. Marianne told everything she had seen. With each word, Adeline's face grew more and more serious. "They are stealing from the El Campo farm," Mariana finished, "and Raoul is helping them." "Are you sure?" "I've seen the crates with their logo on them, and those regulars, the money in envelopes." Adelina shook her head. "These are dangerous people, daughter. Very dangerous. You need to be more careful." "What should I do, Mom?" "For starters, keep quiet. Don't show that you know anything. And most importantly, think about Angela. She needs to be safe." Marianne nodded. The thought of her daughter made her heart clench with fear. What if Raoul or the Santos brothers found out about her surveillance? What would they be capable of? Back in her room, she sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the quiet breathing of her sleeping daughter. Her mind reeled with scraps of what she'd seen during the day. Carla's expensive dress, the dark drawers, the envelopes of money, Raoul's angry eyes. She had to do something. But what? Go to the police? What if the right people had already been bought there? In their small town, everyone knew each other. Information spread instantly. Marianne decided to continue her surveillance. Now that she knew what to look for, she could find out more. Find out their routes, delivery times, names of accomplices, gather evidence so she could then... Before she could finish the thought, she heard the sound of a motorcycle outside. Raoul had returned. Marianne quickly got into bed and closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. Her husband fiddled in the bathroom for a long time, then sank down on the bed. He still smelled of alcohol, but now the scent of familiar perfume was mixed with it. The next morning, Marianne awoke to the sound of breaking dishes. In the kitchen, Raoul, pale and wrinkled from last night's drinking, was trying to make coffee. Shards of Marianne's favorite cup lay on the floor. "I'll clean it up," he muttered, bending awkwardly for the broom. He was shaking. Marianne silently began picking up the shards. It was a cup from her grandmother's set, the only thing left to remember. She carefully wrapped the shards in newspaper, as if burying a piece of her past life. Raoul left for work without even eating breakfast. Angela, awakened by the noise, was cranky and refused to eat. Marianne mechanically prepared breakfast, tried to persuade her daughter to eat at least a little, but her thoughts were far away. "Come to my place." Adeline appeared on the threshold of the kitchen. "We need to talk." Her mother's room was always cool and quiet. Adelina sat her daughter in an old armchair, settling herself on the edge of the bed. "Tell us what you learned yesterday." Marianne began to speak, slowly choosing her words. She described everything she had seen: the steady stream of people, the crates with the farm's logo, the envelopes of money. Adelina listened silently, only frowning harder and harder. "I asked the neighbors about the El Campo farm," Marianne continued. "It's a large farm about 20 kilometers from here. They grow fruits and vegetables and supply the capital with produce. The owner is Ernesto Valencia. He lives on the farm there." "And you think they steal his produce?" "I'm sure they are. Yesterday I saw a truck leave fully loaded with crates with the farm's logo on them. And it happens regularly. The neighbors say the Santos brothers often leave at night and come back in the morning." Adeline stood up, paced the room. "And Raoul? What is his role in all this?" Marianne clasped her hands together. "I don't know exactly, but he is often at their house, especially in the evenings. Yesterday I saw him go into the house with Manuel Santos. And that money, Mom, where does he get the extra money for booze, for new clothes?" "You have to be more careful, daughter. People like that are dangerous. If they suspect you know something." "I'm already afraid, Mom. Raoul came back last night drunk, asking where I'd been. I think he's been following me." Adelina turned pale. "We have to do something. Maybe talk to the police? What if they're bought? In a town this small, everyone knows each other. The information would reach them instantly." They fell silent as they heard Angela's footsteps in the hallway. The girl peeked into the room. "Grandma, can I play with your buttons?" Adelina had an old tin box with colorful buttons, her granddaughter's favorite toy. "Sure, honey. Just don't scatter them." Angela settled herself in the corner of the room, arranging the buttons by color. Marianne watched her daughter, feeling her heart clench. What would happen to her if everything came to light? If Raoul was arrested? "We need to gather more information," she said quietly. "Find out their routes, delivery times. Maybe even try to track the truck." "It's too dangerous." "What's there to do? Sit back and watch my husband mess with criminals? Like risk everything we have?" At that moment, Rosita knocked on the door. She flew into the room, excited and out of breath. "Did you hear? There's a big shipment of goods missing from the El Campo farm. They say a huge amount of produce has been stolen." Mariana and Adelina looked at each other. Rosita continued, "And they also say it's not the first time. They say it's not the first time, but it used to be smaller, and now the thieves have gotten so brazen." "How do you know?" Marianne asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "A farm laborer came into the bakery, told me the owner was furious, threatening to hire private security guards." Angela lifted her head from her buttons. "Mom, what's stolen?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Play." Mariana stroked her daughter's head. "Rosita, what else do they say?" "Oh, they say all sorts of things. Some are sure it's locals. Some think it's a gang from the capital. The police seem to have started an investigation, but—" She waved her hand. "You know our police." Rosita left after half an hour, leaving behind an unsettling feeling. Marianne looked out the window at the dusty street where tired miners were shaving. The shift change was beginning. "I'm going to the farm," she said suddenly. "What?" Adeline turned sharply toward her daughter. "Not right now, but I have to talk to the owner. Tell him what I know." "You're crazy. They'll kill you." "What do we do, Mom? Wait for Raoul to finally get mixed up in their business? Wait for him to be arrested? What will happen to Angela then?" Adelina sat down next to her daughter. "Let's think about it. There has to be another way out." But both knew there was no other way. Marianne had already made her decision. All that was left was to choose the right moment. The rest of the day passed in the usual troubles. Marianne did laundry, cooked, played with her daughter. But every sound of a motorcycle outside made her shudder. Was it Raoul returning? Were the Santos brothers riding by? In the evening she went again to the observation post outside Carla's house. This time she set up in an alley with a clear view of the backyard. There she saw another shipment of crates being unloaded, this time stacked in an outbuilding, carefully camouflaged with a tarp. One of the brothers, Jorge, noticed some movement in the alley and headed in her direction. Mariana barely had time to hide behind the garbage cans. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it could be heard across the street. Jorge stood for a few minutes looking around, then returned to the courtyard. Mariana heard him say to his brother, "You should be more careful. There are too many prying eyes lately." She sat in her hiding place for another hour, writing down license plate numbers, arrival, and departure times. It could all come in handy when she decided to go to the owner of the farm. Marianne got home late. Raoul was already asleep or pretending to be asleep. A note from Adelina lay on the table. "Angela had dinner and went to bed. She misses you." Those simple words hit the hardest. She had indeed begun to spend less time with her daughter, consumed with her surveillance and investigation. But did she have a choice? Could she just sit idly by, knowing what was going on? Marianne sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out a tattered notebook. In it, she wrote down all her observations times, dates, license plate numbers, names of people who came to the Santos house. The pages were scribbled in small handwriting, evidence of criminal activity that could cost her her life. That night, Mariana decided to change her surveillance tactics. Instead of her usual spot in a cafe or an alley near the Santos's house, she chose a position farther away, at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The road leading to the El Campo farmhouse was clearly visible from there. She dressed in dark clothes, her hair hidden under a scarf. In her bag was a thermos of coffee and sandwiches for the long wait. She told Adelina she was going to a friend's house, but she could see in her mother's eyes that she didn't believe her. "Take care of yourself," was all Adelina said, hugging her daughter tightly. Angela was cranky, not wanting to let her mom go. "Are you leaving again? You're not playing with me at all." These words stabbed Mariana in the heart, but she forced herself to leave. For her daughter's sake, she repeated to herself. It was all for her sake. The old warehouse smelled of dust and rust. Marianne settled down on the second floor, by a broken window. From here she had a view of the road and part of the city. The lights were coming on in the thickening dusk, the yellow squares of windows, the dim lanterns on the poles. Around 9 p.m., she saw the familiar Santos Brothers truck. It drove slowly past the warehouse and turned onto a country road. Half an hour later, another vehicle appeared, an old pickup truck driven by Manuel. A motorcycle followed. Marianne recognized the distinctive sound of the engine. Raoul. She pulled a notebook out of her bag and wrote down the time and license plate numbers. Her hands trembled, but her handwriting remained clear. She'd learned to control her emotions over the days. An hour passed. It became completely dark. Only the moon illuminated the road with a silvery light. Suddenly, Marianne heard the noise of engines. The cars were returning. The first to appear was a truck, now loaded with crates that were carelessly covered with tarps. It was followed by a pickup truck, also filled with cargo. They stopped not far from the warehouse. Marianne ducked down, afraid of being seen, but kept watching. Jorge got out of the cab of the truck and approached Manuel. They talked briefly about something, then took out cigarettes. In the light of the lighter, she saw Raúl's face. He was standing next to his brothers, actively explaining something to them. Scraps of phrases came to her. Next shipment, a big shipment. We have to get it in before dawn. Carla appeared suddenly. She drove up in a brand new car, got out, tapping her heels on the asphalt. Her red dress gleamed in the darkness. She came up to Raúl and put her hand on his shoulder. They talked quietly about something, and then Carla laughed. A ringing, carefree laugh. Marianne clenched her fists so hard that her nails dug into her palms. It was one thing to suspect, and quite another to see it with her own eyes. Raúl and Carla stood too close together, their postures betraying their usual intimacy. Suddenly, Manuel raised his head, peering into the darkness. "There's someone out there." His voice was barely audible, but Mariana went cold with fear. She retreated into the depths of the warehouse, holding her breath. "Check it out," Jorge commanded. Footsteps were heard. Someone was heading toward the warehouse. Marianne cautiously made her way between the old crates, trying to move silently. Her heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed everyone around her could hear it. "There's no one here," came Manuel's voice after a few minutes. "I guess so." The cars left one by one. The last to leave were Raúl and Carla, together on his motorcycle. Marianne saw the woman snuggled against her husband's back, her hair fluttering in the wind. She sat in her hiding place for another hour, afraid to move. Her mind reeled with fragments of what she had seen, the crates from the farm, the secret meetings, the closeness of Raúl and Carla. It all added up to a terrible picture. Her husband was not just involved in the thefts, he was an active member of the criminal group. Marianne returned home well past midnight. The house was quiet. Only the clock ticked in the kitchen. She checked Angela's room. The girl was asleep, hugging a teddy bear. On the pillow was a drawing of 3 figures holding hands: Mommy, Daddy, and Angela. All of them had smiles painted on their faces. Marianne carefully took the drawing, hid it in her pocket. Then she went into the bedroom. The bed was empty. Raúl had not returned. She knew where he was, in Carla's house, in her arms. The thought was no longer painful. It was replaced by a cold determination. Taking out a notebook, she wrote down all the details of tonight: time, route, license plate numbers, conversations. Then she took out an envelope and put in it all the evidence she'd collected over the days: notes, photos taken with an old camera, lists of license plates and names. There was a rustle in the kitchen as Adelina got up for a drink of water. When she saw her daughter, she sat down silently beside her. "I saw everything, Mama," Marianne said quietly. "They steal from the farm. Regularly, at night. They have a whole system. And Raúl? He's with them. He's been with them from the beginning. And her." Adeline took her daughter's hand. "What are you going to do?" "What I have to. I'm going to go to the owner of the farm. I'm going to tell him everything I know. It's dangerous." "What isn't dangerous? Waiting for them to get caught? Waiting for Raúl to be arrested? What will happen to Angela then?" They sat in the dark for a long time, holding hands. Somewhere in the city, the first rooster crowed. The dawn was coming. A new day brought with it new fears and new decisions. "I'll go to Valencia's tomorrow," Marianne finally said, "right after the family feast." "A party? You still want to have one?" "Yes. Let it be business as usual. I don't want to arouse suspicion." Adeline shook her head. "Be careful, daughter. These people, they will stop at nothing." Marianne grinned unhappily. "I know, Mom. That's why I can't keep quiet anymore." Mary Ann got up before dawn to begin preparations. Every year they celebrated the day Adeline had first brought her and Rosita to this house, the day they became a real family. Adelina was already in the kitchen, kneading the dough for the old-fashioned holiday scones. Her hands, covered with age spots, were confidently kneading the elastic dough. Mary Ann remembered that smell from her childhood. Warm, cozy, smelling of home and happiness. "Can I help you, Mother?" she asked, tying her apron. "Better get to work on the meat. And don't forget to get the holiday tablecloth, the one with the embroidery." The tablecloth was stored in an old dresser wrapped in a clean sheet. Mary Ann carefully unwrapped it, snow white, with skillful embroidery around the edges. Her grandmother's work, passed down from generation to generation. How many holidays did this cloth remember? How many happy moments did it hold? Rosita arrived around 9, out of breath, carrying a bag of fresh buns from the bakery. "I made it before the opening. The owner baked them especially for us. Cinnamon, just the way we like them." Angela was already spinning around in the kitchen, trying to snatch a hot bun. Mary Ann slapped her on the arm. "Wait for the guests, sweetie. Better help Grandma set the table." Raoul showed up near lunchtime, frowning, sleep-deprived. He mumbled something about the mine and locked himself in the bathroom. Mary Ann pretended not to notice the odor of foreign perfume coming from his shirt. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the table was set. Snow-white tablecloth, the best dishes, a bouquet of wildflowers in an old vase. Mary Ann arranged the plates, and each one rang in her hands like a bell. She remembered how proud her grandmother had been of this set, the only thing of value in the house. Guests began to gather after 4 o'clock. Raoul's cousins and their families came, neighbors they'd been friends with for years, Rosita's friends from the bakery. The house was filled with voices, laughter, the clinking of dishes. Mary Ann smiled mechanically, answered questions, put food on plates. But inside her, everything clenched with a premonition of trouble. She knew something must happen. This fake feast could not end peacefully. "How pale you look," Rosita whispered to her as she helped her serve the drinks. "Why don't you lie down?" "I'm fine," Mary Ann shook her head. "Just tired with the preparations." Raoul sat at the head of the table, telling some story from the mine. The guests laughed, but Mary Ann could see the falseness in his smile, the tension in his shoulders. He glanced at the front door every now and then as if he were waiting for someone. Angela ran between the guests, showing everyone her new doll, a gift from Aunt Rosita. Her tinkling laughter cut through the thick air of the party like a ray of sunshine piercing the storm clouds. And then something happened that Mary Ann had not expected. The door swung open and Carla Santos appeared on the threshold. She was wearing the same red dress, high heels, her hair styled. It was as if she had appeared on purpose to emphasize the difference between herself and the lady of the house in the simple blue dress. There was silence in the room. Even the children had stopped making noise, sensing the tension of the adults. Raoul jumped up from his seat but immediately froze, not knowing what to do. "Good evening, everyone," Carla smiled, looking around the gathering. "I hope I'm not too late to the festivities." Mary Ann felt the eyes of the guests on her. Some looked with curiosity, some with pity, some averted their eyes. They knew. All of them knew. "This is a family celebration," Adeline said firmly, rising from her seat. "We weren't expecting outsiders." "Oh, but I'm almost family," Carla laughed. "Aren't you, Raoul?" Mary Ann saw how pale her husband had turned, how his hands trembled. She walked slowly over to the sideboard where an antique vase stood, the only valuable thing left from her grandmother. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. But in the ringing silence her voice was audible to all. "I came to congratulate the family," Carla emphasized the last word. "And to break the news, Raoul is going to live with me now. Right, honey?" The guests whispered. Some began to hastily gather, realizing that a scandal was about to break out. Angela, frightened by what was happening, clung to her grandmother. "Get out of my house," Mariana pronounced. "Yours?" Carla walked over to the table, carelessly running her finger across the snow-white tablecloth. "It will be empty soon. Raoul, pack your things." Raoul stood with his head down. His silence was more eloquent than any words. "I said get out." "Or else what?" Carla picked up the vase, turning it carelessly in her hands. "What can you do? You're just a pathetic housewife who hasn't even seen her husband cheat on her for years." "Put the vase down," Marianne's voice trembled. "That old junk?" Carla grinned contemptuously. "It's not even worth 3 pesos. And then something happened that no one expected. Carla, as if by accident, unclenched her fingers. The vase fell to the floor, shattering into dozens of pieces. In the silence that followed, the porcelain shards could be heard tinkling as they rolled across the floor. "Oh, how embarrassing," Carla smiled, but her eyes read gloating. "I hope it wasn't valuable?" Marianne stared at the shards, feeling something inside her break. Not the vase. She herself was shattering like this porcelain. Each shard was a part of her life, her trust, her love. "You," she began, but suddenly caught Carla's gaze. It read defiance, superiority, and something else. Fear? "You're afraid." "What?" Carla's smile trembled. "You're afraid," Marianne repeated more confidently. "Afraid I'll tell about your business on the farm, about the thefts, about the night rides, about selling stolen goods." Now Carla turned pale. She glanced quickly at Raoul, who froze like a statue. "I don't know what you're talking about," her voice became hard. "But if you're thinking of spreading rumors—" "Rumors? I have proof. Records, photos, license plates. I have it all." The room became so quiet that the ticking of the old clock on the wall could be heard. The last guests were leaving the house in a hurry, dragging the children behind them. Only those closest to them remained: Adelina, clutching Angela to her, and Rosita, frozen at the kitchen door. Carla was the first to break the silence. Her laughter sounded unnaturally loud in the empty room. "Evidence? And what are you going to do with them? Go to the police?" Marianne stood motionless, staring at the shards of the vase at her feet. Each one reflected the dim light of the lamp like a small broken mirror. In one of the shards she saw Raoul's distorted face, pale with a frozen expression of fear. "No," Marianne said slowly. "I will go to Ernesto Valencia. I'll tell him everything about the nighttime thefts, about your routes, about the warehouse where you keep the stolen goods." Now it was not only Carla who turned pale, but Raoul as well. He stepped forward. "Marianne, don't do anything stupid." "Stupidity?" She turned to her husband. "Stupid things are stealing. Foolish things are to associate with criminals. Stupidity is betraying your family." Adeline tried to take Angela into another room, but the girl burst out, "Mommy! Daddy! Why are you yelling?" "Quiet, sweetheart." Rosita picked her niece up in her arms. "Come with me. I'll show you the new picture books." Carla escorted them with a look, then slowly turned to Marianne. "You don't know anything. You think it's just stealing. You think you can just go and tell. I know enough. I know you've been stealing from Valencia Farm for months now. I know you've been selling stolen goods in the neighboring town. I know all the routes, all the distribution points." "And you think they'll believe you?" Carla stepped closer. "Do you think a simple housewife will be believed more than the respected people of the city?" "Respectable?" Marianne grinned bitterly. "Thieves and traitors." "Shut up!" Raoul suddenly bellowed, his face contorted with rage. "You don't realize what you're getting into." It was the first time Marianne had ever seen her husband like this, his face twisted with anger, his hands shaking. This man was a stranger to her, unfamiliar, frightening. "Explain to me," she said quietly. "Explain to me why you got involved with them. Why you betrayed us. Betrayed? He laughed hysterically. I did everything for you. You think you can live on a miner's wage? Do you think I didn't see you counting every peso? We lived modestly but honestly. Honest? He spat. Honesty doesn't feed children, Mariana. Carla put her hand on his shoulder. Don't explain it to her. She won't understand anyway. The main thing now is to keep her quiet. There was a clear threat in her voice. Marianne felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? What do you think? Carla smiled, but her eyes remained cold. We can't let you destroy everything we've built. Built? Adelina, who had hitherto been watching silently, intervened. You have built nothing. You're stealing from honest people. Shut up, old woman, Carla snapped back. This is none of your business. Don't you dare talk to my mother like that. Marianne stepped forward, but Raoul grabbed her arm. Stay where you are, he muttered through gritted teeth, or else you'll be sorry. Are you threatening me? Me? The mother of your child? Something flashed in his eyes for a moment. Shame? Remorse? But it disappeared immediately. I'm trying to protect you. From yourself. Stop talking. Carla tapped her heel impatiently on the floor. Tell her. Raoul took a deep breath. Marianne, listen. Forget everything you've seen. Forget what you know. Live as you have lived. Otherwise what? Otherwise we can't guarantee safety, yours and Angela's. Those words fell like stones into the silence of the room. Marianne felt the ground go from under her feet. She'd expected anything, yelling, threats, even violence, but to have Raoul threaten their own daughter. You wouldn't dare, she whispered. He doesn't, Carla grinned. My brothers, on the other hand, are different. They're not so sentimental. Get out of my house, Marianne's voice trembled. Both of you, get out. You don't get it, Carla shook her head. Now you're going to do what we say, or the consequences will be unpleasant. I'm not afraid of you. You should be afraid. You love your daughter, don't you? Do you want something to happen to her? An accident on the street, for instance? Marianne lunged at Carla, but Raoul intercepted her. Calm down. You're making things worse. Worse? She broke free of his grip. How much worse? You're threatening your daughter, your own blood. I'm trying to save you both, he yelled. You think I want to do that? You think I like it? Then stop it. Stop everything. It's too late, he said quietly. Too late. Carla walked over to him, taking him under her arm. Come on, honey. There's nothing else to do here. And you, she turned to Marianne, you have until morning. Think carefully about your behavior and about your daughter's safety. They headed for the exit. At the door, Raoul stopped, turned around. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean for things to go this way. Get out, Marianne muttered through gritted teeth, and don't you dare come back. When the door closed behind them, she sank slowly to the floor, right among the vase shards. Adeline rushed to her daughter. Marianne, careful, you'll cut yourself. Already cut myself, Mom, she whispered. I cut myself a long time ago, just never noticed the blood. Rosita's voice came from the nursery. She was reading Angela a story, trying to distract the girl from what was happening. But how long could one hide a child from the truth? How do you protect her from this nightmare? What are you going to do? Adeline asked, helping her daughter up. Marianne looked at the shards of the vase, then at the door behind which Raoul and Carla had hidden. Something I should have done a long time ago. I'm going to Valencia's. But they threatened Angela, which is exactly why I have to stop it. Now, before it's too late. After Raoul and Carla left, an oppressive silence reigned in the house. Marianne mechanically collected the shards of the vase, placing them in a cardboard box. She wrapped each shard in newsprint as if burying a piece of her past. Adelina silently cleared the remains of the holiday meal from the table. Untouched dishes, unfinished glasses, crumpled napkins. Everything testified to the sudden end of the celebration. The white tablecloth was stained with red wine. Someone had knocked over a glass during the commotion. Rosita put Angela to bed in her room. The girl could not calm down for a long time. She kept asking why Daddy had left, why Mommy was crying, who was that evil aunt in the red dress. Her sister told her stories until the little girl fell asleep. "We have to leave," Rosita said quietly back in the kitchen. Right now. They weren't kidding with the threats. Mary Ann shook her head. "Where to? We don't have any money. And then they'll find us. The town's small. Everyone knows each other." "Then what are you going to do? Wait for them to carry out their threats?" At that moment, a rock flew into the kitchen window, shattering the glass. The women shrieked. On the floor among the shards lay a note wrapped around the stone. With trembling hands, Mary Ann unfolded the paper. "Think of your daughter. You have until dawn." Adeline rushed to check the doors. "We need to close all the windows, barricade the doors." "It's no use," Mary Ann said tiredly. "If they want to come in, they'll come in." She sank back in her chair, looking at the broken window. The cool night air blew into the kitchen, ruffling the curtains. "I'm going to Valencia's. Now." "At night? You're crazy," Rosita exclaimed. "What is there for me to do? Wait for them to harm Angela? No, we must act first." Mary Ann went upstairs to the bedroom, pulled an envelope of evidence from a hiding place under the floorboards, notes, photographs, lists of license plates, everything she'd been collecting for the past weeks. Her hands trembled as she checked the contents. An old bag was found in the closet, the same one she'd once brought to this house as a bride. Mary Ann put the essentials in it: papers, some money, a change of clothes. "Mom, will you watch Angela?" she asked, heading downstairs. Adelina nodded. "Of course, but you can't go alone." "I have to. The fewer people involved, the safer." Rosita grabbed her sister's hand. "Then at least take this." She held out a small penknife, old but sharp. "Just in case." Mary Ann tucked the knife into the pocket of her dress, then walked to the room where Angela slept. The girl was curled up, cuddled against a teddy bear. Her face was serene in her sleep. She didn't yet realize the storm that had erupted around her. "I love you, little one," Mary Ann whispered, gently kissing her daughter's forehead. "It's going to be okay. I promise." She ran into her mother in the hallway. Adeline silently held out a small locket to her, an antique locket passed down in their family for generations. "It has protected me all my life," she said. "Now let it protect you." Mary Ann put the locket on. The metal was warm, as if it held the warmth of a mother's hands. "If I don't return before morning," she began. "You will come back," Adeline said firmly. "You must come back for Angela's sake." At the door, Mary Ann turned around one last time. Her mother and sister stood in the semi-darkness of the hallway, two shadows, two pillars of her life. How many times had they seen her off like this, to school, to dates, to marriage? But never had the seeing her off been so hard. The night greeted her with coolness and silence. The streets were deserted. Only the streetlights cast yellow circles of light on the sidewalks. Mary Ann walked quickly, trying to stay in the shadows. Every rustle made her flinch. Every shadow seemed threatening. It was about a 2-hour walk to Valencia's farm. Mariana knew the road. She'd watched the Santos brothers' trucks go there many times. Now it was up to her to make the journey herself. On the outskirts of town, she heard the sound of an engine. Instinctively, she ducked behind a hedge and pressed herself to the ground. A familiar truck drove past, with Jorge Santos behind the wheel. Are they looking for her? When the sound of the engine died away, Mariana cautiously climbed out of her hiding place. Her dress was stained with soil, but that was the least of her problems. The main thing was that she hadn't been spotted. The road went through fields of tall grass. The moon appeared and disappeared behind the clouds, making the path bright or completely dark. Somewhere in the distance, the lights of the farmhouse flickered. It was like a small island of light in a sea of darkness. Suddenly, Marianne heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw a figure in the shadows of the trees. Her heart raced like a madman. She quickened her stride, almost sprinting. The footsteps behind her became more frequent. Someone was following her, no longer hiding. Marianne clutched the hilt of her knife in her pocket. If she had to defend herself— "Stop!" A man's voice cut through the silence of the night. Marianne recognized him. Manuel Santos. "Stop, or you'll be sorry." She rushed to run. Behind her she heard the stomping of several pairs of feet. There was more than one. Her chest burned, her feet tangled in the tall grass, but fear gave her strength. There was a crossroads ahead where the road split into two. One led to the farm, the other to the neighboring town. Marianne turned onto a path that led to a thicket of bushes. Maybe it would be possible to confuse the tracks. The pursuers had split up too. She could hear them shouting in the darkness. Someone was shining a flashlight, the beam of light darting across the field, picking out chunks of space from the darkness. "She's here!" someone shouted. "In the bushes!" Marianne ducked, trying to crawl between the bushes. Sharp branches scratched her face and arms, but she ignored the pain. The main thing was to get to the farm. The main thing was to get to Valencia in time to tell Valencia everything. Marianne crawled through the bushes, trying to move as quietly as possible. Sharp branches clung to her clothes, scratching her skin, but she ignored the pain. The only thought pounding in her head was to get to the farm, to find Valencia, to tell him everything. The flashlight beam darted through the bushes very close by. She could hear the heavy breathing of her pursuers, their muffled voices. "Pass through here, look, the branches are broken." The bag clung to every bush, preventing her from moving. But it was impossible to leave it. There lay all the evidence without which her words would be worthless. Suddenly there came the sound of a motor ahead. Marianne froze. A truck of the Santos brothers slowly drove down the road. So they've cordoned off all routes to the farm, corralling her like a wild animal. She turned away from the road, going deeper into the field. The tall grass hid her, but it was harder to move through it. Each step was difficult. The ground was soft after the recent rain, her feet drowning in mud. "Check the field," came Manuel's voice. "She can't have gotten far." Mariana crouched to the ground. The grass smelled damp and something bitter. She tried to breathe as quietly as possible, though her heart was pounding so hard she thought her pursuers might hear it. Two men came past. She could see their feet through the stalks of grass. One held a flashlight, the other something like a stick or a bat. They stopped quite close. "Maybe she turned toward the river?" one asked. "No, too smart for that," the other replied. Mariana recognized Jorge's voice. "She's heading toward the farm. I tell you exactly." Couldn't Raúl hold her back? He got soft. He felt sorry for his wife and daughter. "And now we have to worry. If she gets to Valencia—" "She won't." Jorge's voice became hard. "We'll find her. Carla said no matter what it takes." They walked on. Mariana lifted her head cautiously. The pursuers were heading toward the road. She waited a few more minutes, then slowly crawled in the opposite direction. It was about a kilometer to the farm. She could see the lights of the main house. They flickered like a beacon in the darkness. But between her and those lights were her pursuers, armed men ready for anything. Something prickled in the pocket of her dress, the knife Rosita had given her. So small, almost toy-like. What could she do with it against grown men? Suddenly, Angela's face came to mind, sleeping, serene, unaware that her mother was now crawling across a muddy field, saving her life. What would happen to her if Mariana was caught? Who would protect her from Carla and her brothers? These thoughts gave her strength. Marianne rose to her knees, looked around. The pursuers were spread out across the field, methodically combing each area. But there was one path they didn't seem to have noticed, a narrow strip of mown grass leading to an old barn. She remembered that barn, had seen it when she followed the Santos trucks. Sometimes they stopped there, reloading goods. With luck, she could slip past it unnoticed. Marianne crawled toward the barn, trying to move as carefully as possible. Every rustle seemed deafening, every crunch of branch under her hands like thunder. When she reached the barn, she pressed herself against its wall, catching her breath. The old boards smelled musty and rotten. Somewhere upstairs, birds were flitting about, owls probably nesting there. Cautiously peering around the corner, she saw that the pursuers were still searching the field. Their flashlights flickered in the darkness like fireflies. It wasn't far to the farm. If you ran through the cornfield, you could get there in 15 minutes. Marianne was about to move on when she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Someone was walking toward the barn. She pressed herself into the wall, hoping the darkness would hide her. The footsteps stopped quite close. The sound of a lighter, the smell of cigarette smoke. "Check the barn," was Raoul's voice. Marianne's heart beat even faster. Her husband was in on the chase, too. "Why? She's not stupid enough to hide in here," someone replied. "Check," I said. The barn door creaked open. The flashlight beam slid down the walls. Marianne held her breath, slowly backing around the corner. A little longer and she'd be out in the open, but there was no other way out. "Clear," said a voice from the barn. "Just some birds upstairs." "Let's keep moving." Raoul's voice sounded tired. "We've got to find her before dawn." The footsteps receded. Marianne waited another minute, then peered cautiously around the corner. The path was clear. She dashed across the cornfield. The tall stalks whipped at her face, tangled in her legs, but she did not stop. Each step brought her closer to her goal, to salvation. Behind her came a shout, "There! In the corn!" Marianne ran even faster. She heard the stalks crackle as her pursuers rushed after her. The stomping of feet, the shouts, the sound of the engine starting, everything merged into one threatening rumble. Suddenly, the fence of a farmhouse appeared ahead, tall with barbed wire at the top. Marianne froze for a second. How to overcome this obstacle? But there was no time for thinking. The pursuers were approaching. She ran to the fence, threw off her shoes. It was impossible to climb in them. She grabbed the metal mesh and pulled herself up. The sharp edges dug into her palms, but she ignored the pain. "Stop!" Raoul's shout came from very close by. "Marianne, stop!" She had already reached the middle of the fence when someone's hand grabbed her ankle. Marianne kicked at random. There was a shriek. The grip loosened. Pulling herself up again, she found herself at the very top. The barbed wire dug into her clothes, tearing the fabric. But most importantly, she was already climbing over the fence. Jumping to the other side, Marianne rolled on the ground. Her bag flew aside. She quickly picked it up and rushed toward the house, the light from the windows of which now seemed so close and so saving. Behind her, she heard shouts, someone climbing the fence. But she was already running through the farmyard, and each step brought her closer to her goal. A light came on the porch of the house. The door opened. On the threshold stood a man with a gun. Marianne froze in place, raising her hands. "Señor Valencia, don't shoot. I need your help." The man on the porch squinted, peering into the darkness. He was tall, stoutly built, with graying temples. The shotgun in his hands didn't waver. It was obvious he knew how to handle it. "Who are you? What's going on here?" His voice was low and commanding. "My name is Mariana Escobar. I know who is stealing from your farm. I have proof." She took a step forward, holding her bag in front of her. Shouting and cursing could be heard behind the fence. The pursuers were trying to climb over the fence. Valencia raised his rifle higher. "Stay where you are. Everybody stay where you are." Two farm workers, also armed, ran out onto the porch. Somewhere in the backyard, dogs barked. "Senor Valencia, please listen to me." Mariana's voice trembled with despair. "They are coming for me. They threaten my daughter." Something in her voice, in her desperate look, made the farmer decide. "Quickly into the house. Juan Pedro, check the fence." Mariana ran up the steps. In the porch light, Valencia saw her tattered dress, her bloody hands, her face dirty from crawling on the ground. "Jesus, woman, what happened to you?" But there was no time for explanations. Gunshots came from the side of the fence as farm workers fired warning shots at their pursuers. Valencia led Marianne into his office, a large room filled with antique furniture. On the walls hung photographs of the farm in different years, some diplomas and certificates. A massive desk was piled with papers. "Tell me about it," he said briefly, locking the door. With trembling hands, Marianne pulled her evidence out of her bag, a notebook of notes, photographs, lists of license plates, laying it all out on the table. "The Santos brothers have organized a whole system of thefts. They come in at night, load up the goods, take them to other cities. They have their distribution points, their people at the transportation companies." Valencia scrutinized the documents. His face grew increasingly grim. "I suspected something like this, but I didn't think it was this serious. How did you get this information?" "I've been following them for a few weeks after I found out that my husband—" Her voice trailed off. At that moment there was a loud knock at the door. "Señor, there are people there demanding to be let in. They say they are looking for their runaway wife." Valencia looked at Mariana. "Is your husband with them?" She nodded, feeling tears running down her cheeks. "He's in on it too, and his mistress, Carla Santos. They threatened to hurt my daughter if I told you." The farmer rose, walked to the window. In the moonlight he could see a group of men gathered at the gate. They were shouting something, waving their arms. "Señor Valencia!" Raúl's voice echoed throughout the farmhouse. "Come out to talk. This is all a mistake." "What insolence!" the farmer muttered. Then he turned to Marianne. "Stay here. I'll handle this." He went out, locking the door behind him. Marianne went to the window that overlooked the courtyard. Valencia was coming down the porch steps, his employees holding guns at the ready. "What do you want?" The farmer's voice was calm, but there was a sense of steel in it. "My wife!" Raúl shouted. "She's out of her mind, making up some stories." "Stories?" Valencia grinned. "Are the tire tracks of your trucks on my land stories too? And the crates with my farm logo on them in your barn?" There was movement in the crowd at the gate. Carla stepped forward, still wearing the same red dress, only now wrinkled and stained. "Listen," she began in a honeyed voice. "Let's settle this peacefully. We can make a deal." "Arrange?" Valencia interrupted her. "About what? About how you've been stealing from my farm for months? I have connections in town. My brothers know the right people. We can be useful to each other." Marianne saw the farmer's shoulders tense. "Are you threatening me? On my land?" At that moment the sound of sirens came from the side of the road. The red and blue lights of police cars cut through the darkness. "I called the police as soon as I saw the chase at the fence," Valencia said loudly. "They're on their way." The crowd at the gate stirred. The Santos brothers rushed to their cars, but it was too late. The police cars were already blocking the road. Mariana saw Raúl frozen in place, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. How Carla tried to run away but was caught by the farm workers. As the Santos brothers raised their hands, surrounded by police officers with guns. There was a knock on the office door. "Señora Escobar, it's the police. We need your statement." The next few hours passed like a blur. Mariana told her story over and over again, to the police, to the investigators, to Valencia himself. showing evidence, describing routes, naming names. It was getting light when it was over. The Santos brothers and Carla were taken away in handcuffs. Raul was arrested too. He didn't resist, only cast a last look at Mariana, full of bitterness and remorse. "You need to rest," Valencia said, seeing her shivering with fatigue. "I can offer a room." But Mariana shook her head. "No, thank you. I need to go to my daughter's. She doesn't even know where I am." "I'll drive you," he nodded to one of the employees. "Juan, get the car ready." On the drive home, they were silent. Mariana looked out the window at the waking city. The streets were deserted. Only the janitors were beginning their morning work. A police car was already parked outside her house, a security guard, as Valencia had explained, just in case, until all the gang's accomplices were caught. Adelina met her on the doorstep. She'd been up all night, waiting. Silently, she hugged her daughter and took her inside. Angela was still asleep in her crib, unaware that her world had changed forever. "What happens now?" Adelina asked as they sat down in the kitchen. Marianne shook her head. "I don't know, Mom, but whatever it is, we'll make it through. For Angela's sake, we'll handle it." Outside the window, dawn was breaking. A new day brought with it a new life, without lies, without fear, without betrayal. There were many hardships ahead, much pain and tears. But the worst was behind her. Marianne looked at her hands, scratched in dried blood from the barbed wire. Those wounds would heal, just as the wounds in her soul would heal in time. The important thing was that she had protected her daughter. She protected her home. She protected the truth.